Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Bugs Can't Swim, written by General Leia, SAOS. Bourne woke up in the cargo hold of a Skrizid slaver ship. Skrizids were pests, vermin, usually up to no good, but normally not enough of annoyance to worry about. Until now. Bourne was a redneck, a group of humans that had left Earth for freedom and adventure. On Earth, everything was quiet, complacent, uniform. You spent your life being told what to do, what to think, what was real, what your values were, what your value was, how to talk, how to walk, how to dress, and even how to sit. Everything was media and pills. Pills to wake up, pills to go to sleep, pills to hype you up when depressed, pills to calm you down when you're anxious. Media told you what and who were important. They told you what trinkets you needed to solve problems you didn't know you had, and what celebrity personalities you should emulate because they were famous for being famous. The rural areas of Earth were a little better, except that busybody government kept imposing ridiculous urban laws on rural communities. If there was a spike in crime in a city using particle weapons, that city would outlaw particle weapons, which was fine. What wasn't fine is that the government would then include every rural town within 100 kilometers of the ban, even though the rural towns didn't have any crime problems with particle weapons or otherwise. So rednecks got tired of it and left. They would find planets that other aliens deemed too inhospitable and homestead, or they would find a remote area of space fairly close to common trade routes and create a flotilla community. Aliens referred to Earth and the other planet rednecks like to settle as Deathworlds because everything tried to kill you. There was a simple solution: kill it back. The flotillas attracted other independent human tribes, especially gypsies, and some performance troops. Occasionally, a flotilla would start as a mining operation in an asteroid belt and just continue growing with more support business, such as restaurants, clothiers, brothels, and ship dealers, who also did repairs. Redneck life was hard, but good. You were free. Sometimes adult children would leave for Earth, dreaming of the artificial utopia. Some came back, some didn't. Sometimes Earthers would join, especially families that didn't like ideologies being taught in public school, or veterans, or the poor that realized the system was rigged to keep them dependent and in their place. They were all welcome. The only ones who weren't welcome were the ones who didn't like how Earth was, but when they got to redneck territory, they tried to turn it into Earth. If you want shit to be like Earth so damn bad, go the fuck back. But back to the problem at hand. Being cargo on a Skrizid slave ship, Bourne looked around and was surprised, then angered by what he saw. Normally, Skrizids would capture young adults, and adults were laborers. However, this time, they had captured everyone, old, young, even infants, men, women, some pregnant, the healthy and the sick. What in the holy hell was going on? Bourne walked around, checking on people. Everyone child-sized and larger was manacled with magnetic restraints. The restraints were simple. Push a button on a remote and the magnets activated, force your legs together and pinning your arms to your sides so you couldn't resist or run, but were unarmed. At least the bosses didn't want to damage the merchandise, Bourne thought. Bourne saw a feeding area in one corner of the hold. Then the far corner had a toilet area. It was open to the rest of the area. Damn bugs treating us like livestock, Bourne observed. There was going to be hell to pay for this. He went around checking on people and gathered some heads of household to discuss the situation. Morn, Seamus, an Irish gypsy, Mama Matilda, a Creole matriarch, Torch, a combat veteran from Blood River who was a little too fond of explosives, Big Red, who was obviously born in a mine with a full beard and probably learned to drive an excavator when he was still in diapers. A few assorted others, and Gilbert Preston. Preston lived alone, and there was something about him that made you nervous. He was quiet and kept to himself. Lots of animals didn't like him. People sometimes speculated that he was a serial killer in hiding. Torch would occasionally remark when he was drunk that he kept a special present for Preston, just in case. They discussed the situation. Food would be prioritized, pregnant women and small children first, fighting-capable adults next, then children, and finally the old and infirm. Mama Matilda was the one who suggested this, pointing out that she herself would be in the lowest priority group. Several adults would be designated to be a wall with their backs to the toilet area, so that people could relieve themselves with privacy and dignity. Big Red had suggested that because keeping an internal order among the people would prevent panic and some very stupid decisions. Preston remained silent the whole time. Finally, at the end, Vaughn asked, "Preston, you got anything?" Preston sighed, took off his glasses, cleaned them with the edge of his shirt, then put them back on and spoke. "You're not going to like this. The Scrizzits captured us for more than just labor, or even breeding stock. They have a bloodthirsty religion that involves ritual sacrifice. That's why they were so indiscriminate in who they captured." The gathering was stunned. Then one started to protest. "What in the fu—" Vaughn quickly silenced him. "Keep your voice down. Are you trying to start a panic?" Big Red spoke up. Then we gotta do something and fast. I'll be damned if I'm letting some damn bug gut me like a pig. If they try it, I swear I'm taking a dozen other sons of bitches with me." Vaughn quieted the group and pointed to Preston. "Is there anything else that you could tell us?" Preston answered. "There is good news, more good news, bad news, and more bad news. The good news is that they will try to drown us." A murmur started. "Scrizzit think water is fatal because they can't swim. They also don't know that humans can swim, so they don't know that we can survive being dropped in water. Here's the bad news. We can't let it be known to them that we can swim. We can't just escape. We have to take the ship before they can send a message. And we can't leave any survivors who might go back and tell the others that humans can swim. Even if it means letting a few of our people perish, or even if they surrender, we absolutely cannot leave a single bug alive. If you aren't sure it's dead, kill it again." Seamus asked. "What's the big deal with them knowing that we can swim?" Preston told him. "Scrizzit do sacrifices and executions by simple drowning. It's because their mythology talks about death by drowning, and because they don't know all other species like humans can swim and survive. If we let them find out that it's possible to survive drowning, they'll come up with a way to kill us that we can't survive." Vaughn thought for a minute. "Okay. So then they toss us in the water. We don't sink. Then what?" Preston told him. "The ship will be floating on a water surface. There will be a pavilion set up where the ceremony will take place. Some get tossed in the water. They'll do a bunch of rituals. While that is going on, we'll need a tough crew to overpower the gods, then make their way to the bridge." He looked at Seamus. "You said that you would take a bunch with you. By all means, when they toss you in, absolutely try to take a bunch with you. Same for everyone else. Do whatever it takes to kill every last one. Once we take the ship, we will jettison all the crew into the water, living, dead, and in between. No exceptions." The group looked back and forth between Vaughn and Preston apprehensively. Big Red asked sarcastically, "Anything else we got to worry about?" Vaughn looked at Preston, who nodded. "Yes," he pointed at his own chest. "They will probably tattoo us. Let them. It's imperative that they think that they are in charge up to the moment that we revolt. I know it's a lot to ask, but we have to do this precisely, or else we will die, and Earth will have a galactic war to deal with." Big Red shook his head. "That seems kind of far-fetched, but those bugs should start a whole ass war." Preston looked at him steadily. "If we screw this up and leave survivors or let the message get out, it'll set off a chain reaction." Mama Matilda asked, "How do you know so much about this?" Preston shrugged. "That's not important." Torch crossed his arms and planted his feet. "I think we have a right to know. Why should we listen to you?" Preston looked him dead in the eyes with a classic 1,000-meter stare. His face had a flat, soulless look, and something about his body posture seemed completely menacing. His voice was cold. "You have more important things to worry about." Something about Preston just made Torch's skin crawl at that moment, and the others grew very uncomfortable, even unconsciously leaning or taking a step away from Preston. Vaughn decided that was sufficient for whatever. "Okay, everyone, go back to your people. I'll let you decide who to tell and what to say. You heard the same thing I did. We need a crew to take the bridge, and everyone else needs to swim or help others to swim." As the group dispersed, Vaughn looked at Preston. "Anything else I should know?" Preston gave a nod. "Yes. How to incapacitate and kill them. If you know how, it's actually pretty easy. Basically, go for the joints and eyes, like cracking open a lobster. It's much easier than humans and other mammals. If you don't know how, you're dead." Vaughn shuddered at the casual way he described it. "You would get more feeding from a primitive pre-galactic AI." Vaughn checked on the various groups. It had been pretty well worked out who could swim and were coaching non-swimmers on doggy paddling. Gilbert Preston was quietly instructing people on how to incapacitate and kill the bugs. A few people were squeamish and tried to negotiate the idea. Preston calmly walked over to a mother with a toddler and took the child out of the woman's arms. Preston stood in the center of the group, holding the child upside down at arm's length. As he spoke, the child began to scream and cry, "Look at him! If I drop him now, he will split his skull open on the floor and die. In a few days, a bug will drop this child into water, where he'll perish and die. If you don't kill the bug first chance you get, this child will die." The mother snatched the now shrieking toddler out of Preston's hands and fled to the furthest point in the room she could. Preston watched her, and with bored disinterest. Rumors that Preston was a serial killer were getting pretty aggressive. Up in the worship area, Hive Queen Vavive was on an ornamental display. She had died a few weeks ago, after a distinguished career in hatching many broodlings, including 3 queens. Clergy people were busy with the sacred enchantments and dressing the queen for burial. More and more expensive clothing, trinkets, jewelry, and gifts were being applied to her little throne. Her descent into the water would be glorious. Slave traders were busy selling each slave aboard the Skrizets on a ship and back at the home world. When a queen died, she passed through deep water and to a beautiful afterlife, and who entered the water with her would be her servants in the afterlife, and she would be the guide so their souls didn't get lost. A controversial practice was getting more common, using slaves as a proxy during funerals. Initially, it had been only Skrizet slaves who became proxies because they would be generously compensated. A queen needed servants in the afterlife. You could choose to perish with your queen and be guaranteed to be in paradise since you escorted her, or you could live and take your chances of finding your way when you died. But if you had a slave, you imprinted your name on the slave. It would live lavishly during the queen's 3-week funeral. Then it would go into the water with her. It would serve the queen in place until you died. Only the queen could navigate through the waters to the afterlife. But when you did, if you had a proxy with your name, you simply went to it. You would then serve your queen in paradise. Until you died, your proxy would serve the queen well, so that when you finally appeared, the queen would retain the proxy also. Part of being chosen by the queen for service in the afterlife was to present her with a gift. The improvised could hardly afford a decent gift, so the wealthy, in order to use a proxy, would actually buy 2 gifts for the queen, one for herself and one for the proxy. It was a good system that gave many ineligible Skrizets an opportunity for a good afterlife. Then someone came up with the idea of using alien slaves as proxies. Alien slaves are much cheaper than Skrizet. Buy a slave, tattoo it, and then send it into the water with the queen. You didn't buy a nice gift for the alien proxy to give her, because it would be more desirable for her to discard it once you arrived with your gift. Who wanted to spend an eternity looking at repulsive aliens? Liberal theologians presented this as an opportunity for all Skrizet to live long, prosperous lives. Conservative theologians thought that it was an utter blasphemy to bring aliens to the afterlife, even temporarily. They issued dire threats and warnings, but the warnings fell on mostly deaf ears. Liberal clergy reassured buyers that the irritation of the queen would be pacified when you came to her in the afterlife with a more lavish gift than if you had simply perished at her funeral, since you had extra years to earn more money. The decor of the queen was growing more and more lavish. A crown was removed from her head, so that it could be expanded again to add more jewels. A young acolyte, still a juvenile, rubbed an expensive perfume ointment onto her head while the crown was being reworked. Wood artisans were carving artwood into musical wind instruments that would play notes when there was even the slightest breeze. There was a huge platter of exotic and even deadly foods, included capsaicin, caffeine, meat from venomous animals, narcotic and deadly fungi, as well as samples of sweet fruits from dozens of worlds. You only died once, so in the afterlife you could consume all sorts of deadly entrees to sample exotic flavors. Slavers were busy on the computers, answering customers' questions and updating merchandise profiles. Another group was in charge of tattooing the slaves. They resisted, so it was necessary to anesthetize them to ensure the tattoos were perfect. It wouldn't do to have a customer's soul lost in the waters because their name had been misspelled on proxy. Time was running out. They had only 3 more days, and there were still a dozen or so unpurchased aliens. These were elderly and damaged specimens, missing appendages or other body parts. People worried that was a low-quality proxy would anger the queen when she arrived in the afterlife. Ferzet reviewed the remaining aliens and dropped the price 20%. Maybe he should have listened to Lekik. Lekik was another slaver. He would teach proxies to perform amusing tricks to entertain the queen until the owner arrived. The method of instruction was what you would use for any animal food motivation. The alien would perform a trick and then be given a morsel of food. Some aliens were obstinate until they got hungry enough. Teaching tricks did raise prices, but it took patience, and humans were particularly unruly. Biscuit checked the screen. The lower price had resulted in sales. Praised the Queen for bargain hunters. He noticed that one prime specimen was still up for sale. It was a male, intact and in good health, and mature without being aged. It should have been bought for a handsome price immediately, but still hadn't been purchased. Buzzard reviewed the surveillance on it. It gave no resistance like many of the others did. If anything, comparing it to the others, it was physically more formidable. At times, it looked directly at the surveillance devices. Buzzard experienced a visceral tingle, like when a hungry predator was watching you. He also noticed that the other staves seemed to avoid it, or had protective postures when engaged with it. Buzzard took a gamble. He doubled the price. A few more minutes went by as the sales of the low-quality staves kept trickling in. Finally, a bid came in for the predator, 90% of the higher price. Buzzard responded that another customer had already bid that price, which was why the new price was higher. The bidder waited several minutes. When Buzzard saw that the customer was ready to submit a higher bid, he quickly sent a message saying that the price had been bid up another 30%. The customer responded back after a few moments, with a bid now 20% over that, with a warning that that would be the highest bid. Buzzard waited the appropriate amount of time, then informed the customer of the winning the auction. Preston had Vaughan gather the leaders again. He explained the order of the funeral. First will be the bunch of rituals. Then they'll start dropping people and stuff into the water. The first group will be some bugs and some of us. Those need to be strong swimmers who can swim underwater. They'll be in the water the longest. Next is the Queen on the throne. They'll have some bugs and a bunch of us rolling it down the ramp into the water. Then there'll possibly be a few wagons, and the rest of us, me and the men mostly like to be able to take the ship, need to be in the back. Torch, that definitely means you. You figure out the others. I need about 20. All the bugs will be distracted by the funeral. I'll give the signal. Everyone not in the water yet needs to fight like hell. If you get dropped in the water, don't worry about the bugs. They'll be drowning. But we need everyone else to fight like crazy while my squad goes and takes the bridge. Remember, we can't let a single bug alive. Make absolutely sure it's dead. Completely dead. If you're not sure, get it again. The big day arrived. The Queen was in the small mobile pavilion, with so many treasures that it had been necessary to get supplemental wagons to hold everything. The wagons were attached to her pavilion through brightly colored ornamental ribbons, hundreds of meters long, so these extra gifts would be sure to reach the afterlife with her. Some scrizzard poor, who couldn't even afford damaged alien slaves, had bought the ribbons, while the conservative clergy opposed using alien proxies. They were quite agreeable to the ribbons, so they sold the ribbons with buyers' names written on them. They reassured their customers that the Queen would be far more appreciative of the ribbons than hordes of disgusting aliens. The certificate arrived at the water world. Immediately, the discovery of such a planet had been a spiritual crisis for the Scrizzard, that such a horrid place could exist. It also had endless life forms in the water, from tiny pests to great beasts who could surely consume entire worlds. Theologians had carefully re-examined every religious text they could find, including controversial New Age texts from different franchised youth fringe groups. They concluded, when the first Queen had birthed the universe, she knew that one day her children would be traveling the stars, so she had created these water worlds so the blessed afterlife would always be easily accessible. It was like installing extra doors on a home so that you could admit more guests. As for the life forms in the water, it was thought that they could consume those whom the Queen banished from the afterlife. There was a few ultra-liberals who objected to the use of alien proxies because the Queen was guaranteed to banish them. Well, they didn't relish the thought of sharing the afterlife with the repulsive wretches. Arbitrarily condemning them to oblivion seemed unreasonable. The general opinion of most Scrizzard was, let their gods rescue them if they can. Music was playing on the great deck of the ship, which rested on the waves. Scrizzards were singing, noises that sounded partway between crickets chirping and hornet nest buzzing. Scrizzards, who would be drowning in the funeral, were decked out in colorful clothes and sleepily swayed to the music. It seemed that many had taken narcotics to ease their apprehension about drowning to death. Scrizzards held the colorful banners and flags, even some with ribbons. The young acolyte, who had been rubbing perfumed ointments on the Queen, was now hastily removing her shoes to put on luxurious fur socks and heavy boots that could accommodate the socks. The Queen's feet were shifted so that her previous shoes, laced up bejeweled sandals, could be positioned between her feet. This way, that she would have the option to wear whichever suited her in the afterlife. He glanced around. No one was looking. He hastily pulled out a couple of ribbons and bells attached to his name, written on the ribbons. He tied them around her leg joints, above the socks. He did plan on drowning with her, which normally would be grossly impertinent, given his brief tenure of service. However, he was sure that she would favor him in the afterlife for taking such care to adorn her so beautifully for the funeral. He had hummed soothing lullabies to her as he dressed and anointed her. The bells and the ribbons had a pleasant tinkle, so she could surely favor him and choose him as a personal attendant. He glanced down just a few more gifts at his basket to add. Then he would drink his narcotic potion and go into the water with her. He adored her, but that water was just terrifying. "Forgive me, beautiful one," he whispered. Clergy tossed confetti into the air and led chants. Finally, the crowd let out a cheer and drums began to beat slowly and rhythmically. A couple of priests, at the head of the procession, began to shuffle towards the water groggily, obviously also under the effects of narcotics. The Skrizzits in the procession scooted towards the water after the priest. The humans with them were being prodded with some sort of cattle prod type sticks. They had sharpened points that delivered painful electrical charges. The intent was clear: make the humans go into the water with minimum amount of harm. Most of the humans resisted, a few did not, such as the pregnant woman. She had asked earlier about what would happen. She was afraid that the electric shocks would harm her baby, so she had flatly stated that she wouldn't risk resisting. Most had nodded sympathetically, but Preston told her flatly, "That's no guarantee you'll be safe. The bugs won't spare you or your children because you cooperated. Their only goal is to make sure that you drown as part of their religion. Fighting back is a risk. Not fighting means you're dead, baby. But you won't be alive either." The others were stunned, and she started to cry. Preston, Torch, and a handful of others with solid fighting skills were at the rear of the procession, surrounded by guards. As the mayhem in the front started, all the humans could swim were following a very simple plan: charge the bugs and knock them into the water. Go with them as needed, then try to come back up the ramp. The men and a couple women began attacking the bugs, disabling them as they'd been instructed. There was sickening crunches and bug screams, with yellow bug blood splattering the humans. The procession kept slowly moving forward. The young Skrizzith acolyte was horrified as slaves started stealing some of the queen's precious gifts to use as weapons. He clung to her throne, groggily trying to defend her treasures. As the throne slid off the ramp and into the water, he clung to her desperately, singing a lullaby through sobs. The humans in the front of the procession had discovered how easy it was to defeat bugs by knocking them into the water. They would splash feebly for a minute, then sink and drown. It helped that many of them had been drugged to relieve the anxiety of drowning. Initially, the pregnant woman hadn't resisted until she got hit by a bug stick. She held her stomach protectively and tried running down the ramp to the water, but tripped running into a drugged bug, and she got zapped again. At that point, she became Mama Bear. She shouted and raged, then charged the bug who had zapped her. Her considerable girth gave her momentum, which enabled her to crash into him, even though she zapped her a third time. She viciously assaulted him, flailing and punching him in his multiple giant bug eyes. He tried protecting his face with the zap stick, and she yanked it out of his grasp and started beating him with it. She finally stopped when his head was a bloody yellow pulp. Then she shoved him over the side into the water. Then she started using the stick to beat other bugs that were fighting with other humans. Occasionally, she would get zapped again, which seemed to enrage her even further. Preston and the others overpowered the guards. In the adrenaline rush, a few of the humans saw something quite disturbing. Not only was Preston monstrously strong and had obvious martial arts skills, but he seemed to take pleasure in the gore and killing. He was quickly covered in yellow blood. He had actually torn a forearm from a bug and was using it as an improvised weapon. There was a protective elbow spike at the end of the forearm, which he used to stab bugs in the eyes. Several times he had a smile of grim satisfaction. Seamus thought to himself, "We'll need to do something about him when this is over." Torch had snuck off to find anything he could blow up. He had been given orders, cause as much mayhem as possible indiscriminately. Warren had told him to avoid human casualties. Preston had told him later that he could be completely indiscriminate because any surviving bugs could result in far more devastating retaliation. His one restriction: disable communications, but not destroy it. When the fight was over, no need to call for rescue. Torch went gleefully through the ship, causing as much damage as he could quickly. as he made his way to structures that looked like communication antenna. The Skrizit priests were shouting angrily at the humans and other Skrizits and even each other. The conservative priests were shouting that this debacle was the punishment for blasphemy of involving aliens in a sacred funeral. The liberal priests were shouting that the slavers for not keeping the humans subdued. Many Skrizit were screaming in terror as they realized the humans were some sort of unholy monsters that had the ability to walk through the water and were impervious to drowning. More Skrizit started panicking, adding to the chaos. Preston and the others in his group quickly made their way to the bridge. As the humans assaulted the bugs, the woman hung back, giving every bug a coup de grace, making sure everything was really dead. It was becoming a pretty gory business. At the bridge, the captain had turned on the translator. He had asked in frightened tones, "How is this possible? How do you survive the water?" Before Preston could reply, one of the men burst out, "We're humans, Deathworld, bitch! Our planet is 2/3 water. We swim!" The bug captain quickly pushed a button on the console, just a fraction faster than Preston could get to him. Preston repeatedly smashed his head on the side of the console, while the other humans killed the remaining bugs. They were ready to celebrate victory until Preston grabbed the human who had spoken out and started beating him savagely. The others pulled Preston off, now splattered yellow and red with both kinds of blood. Bourne shouted, "What the hell?" Preston panted angrily, "That idiot just might have started a war. That button the captain used was to launch a black box. Now the bugs will know what happened. Any humans who die at this point will be his fault." Preston kicked and stomped the body of the man's feet, and the others tried to restrain him. The humans successfully captured the ship. After finally apprehending Torch, it seemed that he was thoroughly enjoying the chance to create unrestricted mayhem. When they finally caught him, he was grinning from ear to ear for days. "It's like everything I've ever wanted for all my birthdays. Ever." The communications array was repaired and distress signals sent out. Fortunately, several flotilla members had been independent freight haulers, so they knew several transponder codes. Some bugs were found in various hiding spots on the ship. They were taken to the slave hold. There were some arguments about what to do with them since they surrendered. The argument was settled by a blast. The pregnant woman had lost her baby because of zapsticks. She had managed to find a few of Torch's undetonated improvised bombs and some containers of caustic chemicals. She had even taken a translator with her. "You wanted to drown with your queen in bug heaven. Now you're going to human hell, where we burn." Nothing in the room survived. A fuel ranch ship received their message and came to rescue a few dozen survivors and leave food for the rest. They passed along a message to the local Earth Force military fleet, who came to save the rest of the survivors. Intelligence specialists were quite excited to find a Skrizit ship mostly intact. All of the survivors were debriefed. After Vaughn had been debriefed, he pointed at Preston and told the officer who had debriefed him, "You need to keep an eye on that guy. We wouldn't have made it without him, but there's a lot about him that's pretty damn disturbing. His name is Gilbert Preston." The officer just ignored him, so Vaughn tapped his shoulder. "Did you hear what I said? That guy over there in the blue shirt and glasses." The officer glanced sideways to the corner of his eye for a moment, then replied, "I don't see anyone. No one is there." Vaughn was baffled. "What the hell are you talking about? I'm not hallucinating. He's right freaking there." The security officer looked at him steadily. "I'm going to explain this only once. There is no one there. He doesn't exist. He wasn't here. You never saw him. Nothing happened. Do you understand?" Vaughn slowly nodded. This whole thing was absolutely the weirdest damn thing he'd ever heard of. Earth Command reeled from the unexpected attack. One of their southern continents had just experienced a massive bombing from the Skrizits. They were bugs, mostly an annoyance who preferred to raid isolated settlements to capture slaves. They had been a minor nuisance until now. God only knew what the hell set them off so that they would directly attack Earth like that. Colonel Huang read the report of the damage. This was beyond a disaster. Vice Admiral Bob Mosey walked into the office. Normally protocol would dictate that Huang would come up to attention when A entered the room, but Huang just sat at his desk reading the report. Mosey ignored it, given the nature of the missive. "Well?" Huang handed him a report. "Argentina was the only spot hit, but they took it pretty bad. The bugs sent a message with one word: retaliation." Mosey glanced over the report, then shook his head in bafflement. "Retaliation for what? Nothing changed. We didn't do anything different." Huang shrugged. "No idea, sir. But there is another problem that you will get to deal with. There's a certain Marine that his home country just got attacked." Mosey looked confused for a minute and realized Huang was talking about. "No," he said with horror. Huang nodded. "Oh, yeah. I've already got troops on the ground looking for his daughter and grandchildren. We better pray to God that they survived. Mosey quipped, I thought your people were atheists. Huang responded, it seems like a good time to convert. Mosey sat at his desk, put his head in his arms, and groaned with dread. He remembered this particular Marine from when he was commanding the Eldrin. He had been an absolute terror of the ship, arm wrestling Mosey into going on a pirate hunting expedition because he got bored. In a delirious irony, catching those pirates had been the gold feather in Mosey's cap that had boosted his career to make admiral rank. The Marine hadn't tried to take the credit, but he was more interested in running around in a power suit, blowing up the universe. Mosey finally looked up. All right, let's get this over with. Get Ibanez for me. No good was going to come from this. End of story. I'd quickly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.